another example, the would-be masters of the world are also masters of the unintended consequences. You know that many European and South American countries that signed the Paris Accord, they're really smug about driving their biodiesel cars and trucks around and really proud of it. Problem is they've cut down millions of acres of the Amazon rainforest to accomplish that, to grow a monoculture of soybeans.
Right. That's right.
Now, my understanding is that trees absorb that deadly poison carbon dioxide, and of course it's going to be re-emitted to soybeans when they drive their biodiesel cars. Just another example of unintended consequences.
Yeah, because the soybean doesn't absorb CO2. So the more soys you sow, the less CO2 is going to be absorbed.
There must be some conflict among the environmental community over this whole thing, because as I said, Europeans are pretty, as they're driving their Mercedes and their Honda Accords around, they're pretty smug about the whole thing while they're cutting down the rainforest. Could I mention something about Mr. Jeffrey Immelt?
Oh, the GE guy,
job czars. He sort of replaced Van Jones, the famous Oakland radical who was made the energy czar.
Yeah, that's right. The green czar,
prisoners released from California to build solar panels. Anyway, Jeffrey was replaced him and made the job czar.
Right.
And he almost immediately, he's the CEO of General Electric.
Right.
He almost immediately sent his entire imaging division from Waukesha, Wisconsin, to China.
Right.
Yeah. Another little irony.
Yeah.
And never made the press, but that's a fact. Now, in my understanding, and nobody's argued about it, China's the biggest polluter on Earth.
Absolutely. And China has less environmental regulation, which is why people want to why you can make stuff cheaper there is because there's not any environmental regulation you have to worry about. The New York Times actually had a point about this yesterday, because they were complaining. In the stack of stuff, there was a story there talking about the smog over Beijing, as if this is somehow the world's fault. This is Trump's fault, the smog over Beijing. The smog over Beijing can be fixed in Beijing if the Chinese clean up their act. So nothing that anybody does in Cleveland or Pittsburgh or St. Louis is going to do anything for the... or New York City is going to do anything for the smog in Beijing, any more than the smog in L.A. that they used to go on about was fixed in L.A., just like the smog in Beijing. I love this, the way politicians keep saying, oh, we can't do anything, not unless the whole world signs on to it. I testified in an environmental hearing that Ted Cruz called in the United States Senate, which was one of the grimmest and most miserable and depressing experiences of my life. And Senator Bill Nelson from Florida started going on about water in the streets of Florida coastal cities. And he started going on about New York, Superstorm Sandy. The reason New York was clobbered by Superstorm Sandy is because it hasn't got a flood barrier. It doesn't happen in London. They've got the Thames barrier. It doesn't happen in St. Petersburg, Russia, because they've got a flood barrier. It doesn't happen on the Dutch coast because they've got a flood barrier. If you don't want water in the subway system in New York, build a flood barrier. But instead, old Mayor Bloomberg was too busy regulating large cups of Coca-Cola. He could have had a flood barrier in New York City, and Superstorm Sandy wouldn't have mattered. And it's the same thing with the pollution in Beijing. Most of these things could be actually that have practical consequences could be solved locally, but people are not solving them locally. And as a result, people are going, and that's the other thing about this deal. For most of the participating countries, it was a meaningless deal. It's an irrelevant deal in scientific terms. It's completely irrelevant. It's not irrelevant in terms of the money that the United States has to pony up to bribe the other countries to sign on with for this thing. But it's completely irrelevant, this deal, to anything to do with the planet. And that is why France, Germany, and Italy have just said, the president, this was one of the fun things he said yesterday, he offered to renegotiate the deal. And Germany, Italy, and France have just said, forget it, loser. We're not renegotiating anything. It's this or bust. They have decided. They got together and they decided what the planet needed for the next 100 years. They've figured it out. And it's completely accurate. All the scientists are agreed that this meeting determined exactly what the planet needs until the year 2100. And the idea that Trump can come along and say, can we take another look at it? Forget it. It's done. It's chiseled in granite. This is the plan. We're sticking to the plan. It's the Soviets. They were modest fellas and they only had 5-year plans, those communists. They just had like a 5-year plan here, a 5-year plan there, but we make a century-long plan and we stick to it. This is how it's going to go. So the French, Germans, and Italians have just told Trump, get lost, we're not renegotiating it. And that's good news, because that was the biggest bluff of all when he said, I'm happy to renegotiate this thing. They don't want to know. They don't want to renegotiate it. Mark Stein for Rush.